And as you know by now, there is a housing deficit in Kenya. We have a deficit of close to 200,000 units per year. Well, majority of these people cannot afford the mortgages, and mortgages continue to be inaccessible to many. But just to help us understand why the situation is and what is the way forward, I'm now joined in studio by Pete Muraya, the Chief Executive Officer of Suraya Properties. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
Now, Pete, we're looking at a problem where majority of Kenyans can't afford decent housing. You're in the property market. You've been accused, as most people in the property market, of just focusing on the high end and those who can afford mortgages. But what's there for the rest of us?
There is a basic and a very big need for property in the lower end of the market.
Correct.
And like you said, yes, the developers have been focusing mostly on the high end.
Why is that so, by the way?
I think it's okay, there is a lot of, there's a need in every sector.
Yes.
But I think it's been easier to sell the high end, especially because a lot of more cash buyers in that sector.
Correct.
But
it's a money back.
It's a money, yeah. But, and also because the problem is the mortgage has not been very well sold. And that has been a problem in terms of the property market.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, also talking to a lot of property people are saying, okay, yes, we have a lot of Kenyans who would want to own a decent home, but mortgage remains inaccessible. Are you happy with the kind of mortgage arrangement in Kenya currently?
No. I think mortgage is a big problem.
Yes.
Because if you think about the fact that the total mortgages after 50 years of independence in Kenya is only 20,000 units.
Correct.
And you're talking about, you just mentioned that there's a need of 200,000
and
units.
growing.
So you can imagine that after 50 years, we only have 20,000 mortgages.
What are we not doing right?
The interest rate.
Okay.
Right. There's a study that was done by World Bank, I think in 2010. And that actually is one that announced there's only about 18 to 20,000 mortgages. And I think the challenge is that the interest rate is very high. We need to be able to have the interest rate at about 10%. I think the other challenge is that, from what I hear from the banks, is that we are trying to lend long-term borrowing on short-term money. Now, the World Bank, in their proposal, had indicated that the government should step in and set up a sort of super mortgage company, which would be owned by government plus the banks.
Right.
And then they would go out and borrow long-term funds, like 10 years, 15 years, and pass it on to the mortgages. And I think that's what needs to be done, especially by this new government. We need to create that mortgage mass. I think there's enough developers, and the developers are really working hard to be able to create the housing, because the challenge is not actually the housing so much, it's actually the funding that the buyers need to buy the houses.
And talking about mortgage and the funding, a very critical conversation here is that the young people are up to, what, 60% or even larger than that, part of this population. Yet we have a lot of young people who have disposable incomes, but just the thought of investing in a plan that you pay for 20 to 25 years, and yet in this very limiting interest rate regime. My question really is, how do we get younger people to buy homes in this country?
I think the young people need to understand one thing, that you will never catch up with your rent, right? If you look at what you're paying for rent today, and you look at it 5 years down the line, it will have almost doubled, right? You need to look at it from the side of capital gains.
Yes. Because
people don't seem to understand that property business is about capital gains. When you take a mortgage of any property in the first 5 years, even up to about 7, 8 years, you're going to struggle to pay. But after that 6, 7 years, you will find that your mortgage will become so cheap compared to the rent that is in place. And secondly, you will find that you have now gained capital gains because of time.
Muraya, do we have markets where this approach that you're proposing has actually worked? Are there places we can learn from as Kenya?
I think in the developed world, I mean, if you look at how many mortgages, for example, they do in somewhere like Great Britain, they're talking about close to 1 million mortgages a year. There is a possibility. There is no, I mean, the demand is there. I think we just need to create the environment for the production of two sides, the houses Because what we need to
We're
move
talking
from,
about affordable houses here.
yeah, affordable
Yes,
houses.
yes.
We need to move from a situation of what you might call the small developments into more the larger developments.
Yes.
So that you're now doing houses in terms of thousands as opposed to 20s.
Which, incidentally, you're part of that business of looking at it from a broader scale. But then there are also critics who say this particular model is limiting to many people.
Well, okay, it is limiting, but I
First, in
think
terms of the capital weight you need to carry out such a project, but also at the outcome, the products really, which are the housing units, are way beyond the reach of many Kenyans.
that is correct.
Yes.
But I think that is where I think we as Suraya have come in
Okay.
into the market and identified that there is a serious need for housing that meets the needs and the market capability of the people. And that's why we actually introduced we have two models we introduced in the market.
Yes.
The first one was the Sukasa, which is basically a design that's designed to be sort of out of town, not too close to the city center.
Right.
Our first project is in Mlolongo,
Right.
and we're doing 1,000 units. But the whole point is that we're trying to get a unit that can sell between 1 million shillings and 3 million shillings. And we are very happy to say we have managed to be able to provide a 2-bedroom unit, very well finished. And by the way, it's not low cost.
Yes.
It is affordable. We have
Which, before even you make that point, when the question would be, where is the catch? Because someone is saying every time you see a big billboard written, get a house at 1.2 million or 2 million, there's always a catch. Either the house is too far, you cannot fit the city where you work, or where's the catch in your case?
Okay, we understood that aspect. You see, because land is very expensive in Nairobi. So we understood that, and because you have to pass on the cost of land to the buyers.
Yes.
So we understood that, yes, to get the houses below 3 million, it's not easy when you're near town. And that's why we actually went to Mlolongo.
Correct.
We've now introduced a new brand called Links, which is basically the same unit in Mlolongo. But in this instance, it is within what you might call a developed area. So we have one on Bagathi Road, one in Nairobi West, and now one on Gong Road.
How much is the cost difference from moving it from Lolongo to Mbagathi? where the people
Tremendous,
live?
actually.
Yes.
Because what happens is, when you come to Nairobi, because in the city, nearer the city center, because the land is more expensive, number one. Number two, you're now doing a high-rise building, which is 7-8 floors. You need lifts, you need generators. So there's a bit of additional costs that you must have. The parking must be underground. That's an additional cost of basement.
Yes.
Because there's no space. While in Mlolongo, I can give you open parking, and therefore it doesn't cost as much.
Right.
But in terms of price difference, just to give you an idea, it's almost double. Because the 900,000 unit in Sukasa is 1.8 million at Mbagathi Road. The 3 million house in Mombasa Road, 2-bedroom, is 4.5 million in Mbagathi.
So there's that difference for bringing it
There's
closer
a
to the
huge
people.
difference, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right, and still on that, an issue that has come in the print media recently has been the relationship between rent and property developers. People who are investing in property for rent and the relationship with property developers. I understand some have even gone to court. But going forward, what would be the ideal situation in ensuring that issues of service charge don't overrun the intent of actually making money from rent?
Yeah, it's a big issue. And you see, the problem is that service charge is necessary.
Yes.
Because you want the garbage collected, you want security in your house.
Which is, especially in your kind of investment, you're dealing large
In
scale.
any kind of investment.
Yes.
Whether you're doing 10 houses, I think it's important to have because city council doesn't produce this facility. At the same time, security is an issue. I think the challenge is making sure that it's not punitive. And what we've done as Suraya is we've actually created a system where we are working with an insurance company, and we don't charge you service charge for 10 years, right? So when you buy the house, even at that 3 million, we will provide those services throughout 10 years at no cost.
But throughout 10 years, even if I'm paying 5,000 bob,
You will
at
not
the
pay-
end of the 10
you
years,
will
that
not
amount
pay-
is
No, you didn't get
equivalent to get
You
another
will not
unit.
pay anything
Yes.
for 5 years, for 10 years. That's the difference. We've created a system that enables us in our projects that once you buy in any of our projects, you do not actually pay service charge. But we still provide you with the same services that you'd have gotten for the next 10 years.
Great. Mariah, another critical question here. You're dealing with larger scale property and projects. We have the situation of slums in the area. slum upgrading, of course, has come under very serious criticism. What is the way forward as a property developer in regards to dealing with slums in the city?
I think, in my opinion, the solution is you need to design houses that make sense to the slum upgrading. I feel whatever you're trying to do, if you can't take a person from a 5 square meter house and go and try and make him live in a 35, 40 square meter house and start charging him electricity, start charging him for water, and expect him to live in that house.
All right.
It can't work.
Okay.
It has to be able to design a unit that is close to what he's used to and make it also cost effective for him, because it's not going to work. It has never worked anywhere where you move guys from slums, give them houses and expect them to maintain the houses. They can't.
All right.
Yeah.
Always when you talk about real estate, there's the issue of location. You talk about Sukasa, you talked about links, all these are in Nairobi. We are now moving into county governments, our governors have been sworn in. What are the plans to ensure that not just from you, but entirely players in this sector, that this is replicated in other counties, incentivizing? Because why would I want to move to Bungoma if there's no proper housing?
There is a need for it.
Yes.
I don't know what the government is planning to do.
What is Suraya planning?
Suraya is planning to be in the counties.
Yes.
We want to take the same brands that we are doing to the counties, and we plan that by the end of the year we should be in some counties, and we want to go to all counties. And the idea is that if we're able to give that same person in Bungoma a house for 800,000,
Yes.
he can afford to buy it.
Yes.
So we still want to produce a unit that can sell within the counties, and we are working on modules that can work in the counties.
Right, final question in less than a minute. Whenever we see or hear about large projects, let's talk about Suraya, let's talk about Tatu City and whatnot, there is always a tussle in regards to land ownership, the buying and the selling and whatnot. What is this challenge that we're having in our land system that hinders property development? Because that challenge always comes, we'll always hear there's a battle whenever we have a huge project coming up. Talk
Yeah.
of Tatu City even.
I think there is two issues. One, sometimes it's not the fact that the government needs to actually computerize their system.
Yes.
I think that's the key, number one, because then you can be able to verify quite quickly that you own the land that you say you do.
Right.
Because a lot of times you find that the title that you have is not the correct title.
Yes.
And by the time maybe you find out there's a problem.
Correct.
So if the government actually computerizes that, it would really help in that sense. The other one sometimes is not really controllable, because you could get into a partnership with somebody, and because land value appreciates quite fast, you had agreed that today it's at about 100,000. By the time the project gets off the ground 2 years later,
Right.
it's 200,000.
Correct.
And the person starts feeling like you cheated him, because now you're talking about 200,000, but you had signed at 100,000. So I think that's really the challenge in terms of Tatu City and others like that.
All right.
Yeah.
Pete Muraya, CEO Suraya Properties, many thanks. I'd like to have this conversation on and on, but we have to cut it there. Many thanks for dropping by the
Thank
news
you very
desk
much for having me.
and for just breaking it down to us. And now you do know it is possible for young people to go for properties. All you need to know is know where to look for.